Omajnana timandasya jnanasla slakya saksvan militam yena tasmai sigurave namah. Namam Vishnupadaya Krishnapastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Sanyavadi Paskatyai Desatarine. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Cheva Narottanam Devim Saraswatam Vyasam Tato Jamudirayat Nastave Savatresu Nityam Bhagavata Sevya Bhagavata Tamastuke Bhakti Bhagavata Naistike. So today we will discuss chapter 30.
Recording in progress.
Today we will discuss chapter 13. The Hamsa Avatar answers the questions of the son of Brahma. So in this chapter, the sons of Brahma, that the four sages headed by Sanaka, they are asking some questions to the Supreme Lord, who comes on as Hamsa Avatar. And it's the most pertinent question, or prevalent question, is that yes, we have this mind, and the mind seems to be the connected with the sense objects, or objects, because the sense objects enter the mind. So, and they are asking, yes, the sense objects, they are entering the mind, there is attachment. How can this be prevented? That these sense objects enters in the mind and that the mind becomes attached. So that's their question. But Hamsa Avatar, he will explain that how it is important to cultivate the mode of goodness first. Goodness in this world never exists in a pure form. Therefore, on the material platform, no one is working without personal motivation. That we see that, in Europe here and also in America, people give to charities, which, between brackets, charities mostly under their control, to evade taxes. And that's so. In India, they say that work is worship, but the work will end with the body. So it is an insignificant truth. So unless one is fully Krishna conscious, one will speak truths that are not ultimately significant. And these truths may give one some mercy, but mercy which is ultimately useless. Because the onward march of material time removes all situations and persons from the material stage. Our so-called mercy and truth apply to situations that shortly will not exist. That I was just telling the devotees here that yes, 30 years ago my entire family, and I have a big family, they all rejected me unanimously because I was a Hare Krishna devotee. I tried my best to repair it, but no way, I could not. 30 years. 30 years, I didn't have any contact with them. And 30 years have passed, more than 30 years. And most of them are dead. So where is the problem now? It all ends with the body. It's all temporary. Shortly it will not exist. Still, for an ordinary person, cultivation of the mode of goodness may be a preliminary stage on the road of Krishna consciousness. So it's important that devotees live in the mode of goodness. One must take advantage of an elevated position in material goodness to step onto the platform to transcendence. So we will start this chapter by reading the first verse. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Shri Bhagavan Vacha Satyam Rachastama Iti Guna Buddhir Sasatmanaha Satvanayat Yatamohan Yat Satvam Satvenat Sevahi. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said the three modes of material nature, namely goodness, passion, and ignorance, pertain to material intelligence and not to the spirit soul. By development of the mode of goodness, one can conquer the mode of passion and ignorance and cultivate transcendental goodness. One may free oneself from the material goodness at that time. So, that is the message here. Yes, that come to goodness, get out of passion and ignorance, and from goodness we go to the transcendental platform. That, yes, this is the purport. Can someone read the purport, please, of this first verse?
Goodness in the material world never exists in pure form. Therefore, it is common knowledge that on the material platform, no one is working without personal motivation. In the material world, goodness is always mixed with some amount of passion and ignorance. Whereas spiritual or purified goodness, Vishuddha represents the liberated platform of perfection. Materially, one is proud to be an honest, compassionate man, but unless one is fully Krishna conscious, one will speak truths that are not ultimately significant, and one will give mercy that is ultimately useless. Because the onward march of material time removes all situations and persons from the material stage, our so-called mercy and truth apply to situations that shortly will not exist. Real truth is eternal. Real mercy means to situate people in eternal truth. Still, for an ordinary person, cultivation of material goodness may be a preliminary stage on the road to Krishna consciousness. For example, it is stated in the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam that one who is addicted to meat eating cannot understand the pastimes of Lord Krishna. By cultivation of the material mode of goodness, however, one may become a vegetarian and perhaps come to appreciate the sublime process of Krishna consciousness. Since it is clearly stated in Bhagavad Gita that the material modes of nature constantly rotate, one must take advantage of an elevated position in material goodness to step onto the transcendental platform. Otherwise, as the wheel of time turns, one will again go into the darkness of material ignorance. Thank you, Maharaj.
to the purport of Bhaktivedanta Sarasvati Maharaj. The subtle elements, the mind, intelligence, and false ego are material and under the influence of the three modes of material nature. The spirit soul, on the other hand, is completely aloof from matter. One should regain his original condition of life by curtailing the influence of passion and ignorance, but by cultivating the mode of goodness, and then transcend the influence of mixed material goodness by taking shelter of transcendental goodness, Visuddha Sattva. So what Bhaktivedanta Sarasvati Maharaj says here, how can we conquer passion and ignorance? We can conquer passion and ignorance by cultivating goodness. But when we come to that goodness, it's still material goodness, because it's mixed, not completely pure. But still, even that mixed goodness we can use as a stepping stone for cultivating Krishna consciousness. And that cultivating Krishna consciousness means doing things that help us to develop love for God. That is transcendental. It's not just trying to become a better person in this world. That's mundane. So in this chapter we will hear about goodness and transcending material goodness. So we know chapter 14 of Bhagavad Gita explains those things that are in goodness, passion and ignorance. Thus by choosing food, attitudes, work, recreation, etc., strictly in the mode of goodness, one will become situated in that mode. So the usefulness of sattva guna, or the mode of goodness, is that it produces religious principles aimed at and characterized by devotional service to Lord Krishna. Without such devotional service to the Lord, the mode of goodness is considered useless and merely another illusion. The full maturity of goodness is called Visuddha Sattva, or the transcendental platform on which there is no trace of any other quality. In pure goodness, all knowledge automatically manifests, and that's why it is important. And one can, if all knowledge manifests, one can easily understand one's eternal relationship with Krishna. So, in other words, the mode of goodness is a fertile ground for Dharma. When religious principles are followed, then devotional service can also flourish. We will hear which things we should cultivate in goodness. Okay. Text 2. Sattva dharmo bhavet fridat pumsamat bhakti lakshana sattviko pasaya sattvam tato dharma pavartate. Can someone read the translation, please?
When the living entity becomes strongly situated in the mode of goodness, then religious principles characterized by devotional service to me becomes prominent. One can strengthen the mode of goodness by cultivation of those things that are already situated in goodness, and thus religious principles arise.
Yeah. So the purified mode of goodness is called Visuddha Sattva, or the transcendental platform, on which there is no trace of any other quality. In pure goodness, knowledge automatically manifests, and one can easily understand one's loving relationship with Krishna. That is the actual meaning of religious principles. You see that also when people, I don't know if some of you have that experience in preaching, but if you preach to people who are for a long time already vegetarian, they are more receptive usually. That not always, but that depends on other factors also. Text 3. Dharmarajas tamohan yat sattva-vritir anuttama asanasyati tan mulo iya dharma ubayehate. Can someone read the translation, please?
Religious principles. Go ahead, Kasturika.
It's okay, Mataji. Religious principles strengthened by the mode of goodness destroy the influence of passion and ignorance. When passion and ignorance are overcome, their original cause, irreligion, is quickly vanquished.
Yeah. So when the influence of passion and ignorance is vanquished, irreligious principles that are born of passion and ignorance are also vanquished. Srila Vishwanath Thakur says. There is no superior quality than purified goodness, which when developed vanquishes the qualities of passion and ignorance. When passion and ignorance are destroyed, then irreligion, which is the origin of these qualities, is also destroyed. Text 4. Agama papa sa kala karma sajanmacha jnanam mantrota samskaro dashete guna hetava. Read the translation, please.
According to the quality of religious scriptures, water, one's association with one's children or with people in general, the particular place, the time, activities, birth, meditation, chanting of mantras, and purificatory rituals, the modes of nature become differently prominent.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yes, Mother Kasturika. Mother Kasturika, you are hearing? Yeah.
Yes, Maharaj. Sorry. When it is said that mode of goodness, when it's developed, irreligion will be destroyed. But we see there's so many vegan people out in the Western world, but still they participate in illicit sex, they participate in gambling. So, I mean, how do we understand that they adopt to few segments of mode of goodness, or they are considered to be in mode of goodness?
Mm-hmm. I would say being just a vegan is not a sign of the mode of goodness. But yes, but it's less sinful. Mostly it's in passion, because they want to satisfy their tongue in a more healthy way. That mostly there is a motivation behind. If there is a motivation behind, it's not in the mode of goodness. But still, it's less sinful, and therefore they can understand something of the mode of goodness. Is that okay?
Yes, Maharaj.
Thank you. Good. Text 3. Yeah, so we read text 4, right? And so according to the quality of religious scriptures, water, one's association with one's children, with people in general, the particular place, the time, activities, birth, meditation, chanting of mantras, and purificatory rituals, the modes of nature become differently prominent. Yes. So this verse starts with instructing us what we need to do to cultivate the mode of goodness. And we will hear, can someone read the purport, please?
The 10 items mentioned above possess superior and inferior qualities and are thus identified as being in goodness, passion, or ignorance. One can increase the mood of goodness by selecting religious scripture in goodness, pure water, friendship with other person in goodness, and so on. One should scrupulously avoid any of these 10 items that may be polluted by an inferior mode of nature.
Okay, so the three material modes are prominent in varieties of people, water, time, place, action, mantras, and so on. So there are three kinds of religious scriptures. Religious scriptures in the mode of goodness, in the mode of passion, and in the mode of ignorance. And the next two verses describe objects which are on the platform of goodness. And that's text 5. Tatat sattvikamevasam yat fridha prasaksate nindanti tamasam tat rajasam tat upekshitam. Can someone read the translation, please?
Among the 10 items I have just mentioned, the great sages who understand Vedic knowledge have praised and recommended those that are in the mode of goodness, criticized and rejected those in the mode of ignorance, and shown indifference to those in the mode of passion.
Yes, that indifference to the mode of passion, that so this is text 5. The commentary, Vishvanachaka Vartitaku. The Sattvika scriptures have been glorified by the great sages. The Tamasika scriptures have been criticized, and the Rajasika scriptures has been ignored, meaning that they have neither been praised nor criticized. Among these 10 items, the ones that are beneficial and admirable are Sattvika. The ones that are obnoxious are Tamasika, and the ones that simply give rise to indifference are Rajasika. Text 6. And text 6 gives us more detailed information about cultivating the goodness, the mode of goodness. It's an essential verse. Sattvina kanyeva seva chevita purmam sattva vivittaye dhatu dharma sato jnanam yavat smiti apohanam. Can someone read, please?
Until one revives one direct knowledge of the spirit soul and drives away the illusory identification with the material body and mind caused by the three modes of nature, one must cultivate those things in the mode of goodness. By increasing the mode of goodness, one automatically can understand and practice religious principles, and by such practice, transcendental knowledge is awakened.
Thank you. So, cultivating the mode of goodness. First, study scriptures that teach detachment from mental speculation and material sense gratification. Teaching detachment. We spoke about Dattatreya, and I did some research in the database now yesterday after our talk, after our lesson yesterday. And Dattatreya seems to be a part of Vishnu, an avatar, but his mission was to bring people to the point of liberation, not further than that. And he has taught different devotees, and their names are mentioned there, and brought them to the platform of liberation, but no knowledge of Krishna. Therefore, we see that in the previous chapter, Krishna comes to the point liberation, okay, but without knowledge of me, of Krishna, it's useless. So that, in that sense, this process of liberation may be supportive for us to cultivate attachment, but the real attachment is cultivated by becoming attached to Krishna. That is different. But here we have the mode of goodness, not to get liberation. We cultivate the mode of goodness as a platform from where we go to the transcendental level of acting as a spirit soul, devotional service. So that's different. So study religious scriptures that teach attachment for mental speculation and material sense gratification. Therefore, we have that also in the Bhagavatam. We heard in the previous chapters, in the first chapter we discussed, chapter 10, the futility of fruitive activities that helps us to cultivate attachment. And then one should accept pure water for quenching thirst and cleaning the body. So when you take your meal and so, don't be attached to tea, to drink some nice infusion or a tea or whatever, herbal tea or whatever. No. Krishna says, better is use pure water for quenching thirst. It's important to drink a lot of pure water during the day. That's cleaning the body. And pure water for cleaning the body. Associate with persons who are cultivating detachment from the material world. One should live in a solitary place where devotion service is practiced and discussed among Vaishnavas. One should rise by 4 o'clock in the morning and utilize the auspicious Brahma Muhurta to advance in Krishna consciousness. So we must rise early. My Guru Maharaj Bhaktivedanta Maharaj used to say, everyone has to rise before 4 o'clock. So most disciples, they put their alarm clock at 3:55. 4 o'clock. 4 o'clock. But yes, the morning is the mode of goodness. Execute one's prescribed duties and follow the regulative principles of spiritual life. Executing prescribed duties. Utilize all one's energy for pious purposes. The most pious purpose is the purpose of distributing Krishna consciousness, of course. Time should not be wasted in frivolous or materialistic activities. Don't scroll on the internet, not needed. Accept second initiation from a bona fide spiritual master, that will also help. Learn to chant the Hare Krishna mantra. One should meditate on the Supreme Personality of Godhead as the enjoyer of all sacrifices. As the enjoyer of all sacrifices. Yes, that helps us to forget that we want to enjoy in this world. One should meditate on the lives of great devotees and saintly persons. Meditate on the lives of great devotees and saintly persons. Like, yes, I remember Bhakti Sharmas used to give seminars on the previous acharyas. And he knew all the details. That means, he's attached to studying it. And he knew all the details that, yes, it's Abhay Charan Sirus, also a great meditation on that. So one should not meditate on lusty and envious men. That, be careful. Follow the example of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and chant the Hare Krishna mantra. Mantra. Chant. Purificatory rituals should be performed to purify the spirit soul and not to bring down material blessings on one's material household. So as knowledge increases, one is able to understand the eternal spirit soul and the supreme soul Lord Krishna. Thus the soul becomes free from the artificial imposition of gross and subtle material bodies caused by the modes of material nature. Spiritual knowledge burns to ashes the material designations that cover the living entity, and one's real eternal life begins. So now I also want to read the purport here from Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur on text 6. Yeah, the first paragraph summarizes more or less what I already said. And then, when one tries to cultivate the mode of goodness by following the principles of religion, transcendental knowledge will awaken within the heart. This knowledge consists of the eternal nature of the individual soul and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Such knowledge frees one from the bodily concept of life and thus destroys the material designations that cover the conditioned souls. That is the path of eternal life. And in 2 sentences by Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Maharaj. One who diligently remains aloof from the influence of passion and ignorance can enhance the quality of goodness. Only in this way can one achieve real knowledge and thereby free oneself from the gross and subtle designations that cover his pure existence. Yes. Now Krishna gives an analogy in text 7. Venu sangarsayo vanirtikhta samyati tatvanam evam gunavyatyayo yo teya samyati tatkriyaha. Can someone read the translation?
In the bamboo forest, the wind sometimes rubs the bamboo stalks together, and such friction generates a blazing fire that consumes the very source of its birth, the bamboo forest. Thus the fire is automatically calmed by its own action. Similarly, by the competition and interaction of the material modes of nature, the subtle and gross material bodies are generated. If one uses his mind and body to cultivate knowledge, then such enlightenment destroys the influence of the modes of nature that generated one's body. Thus, like the fire, the body and mind are pacified by their own actions in destroying the source of their birth.
Yeah. I read the purport of Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Maharaj, and it clarifies a bit, somewhat what is said here. The term guna vyatyaya indicates that the body is generated by the competition of the 3 modes of material nature which exist everywhere in constantly changing proportions. As fire produced by the friction of bamboo sticks burns a forest and then become extinguished, the gross and subtle bodies which are generated by the interaction of the modes of material nature become basified when the influence of the modes of nature is destroyed. So you have this term guna vyatyaya. It indicates that the body is generated by the unstable relationship of the three modes of material nature. That there is a constant strife among these modes of nature. So the variety of material modes gives hope to the conditioned soul that by changing their material situation, their unhappiness and frustration can be turned into happiness and satisfaction. But even if one acquires relative material happiness, that will soon be disturbed by the inevitable flux of the material modes. Text 8 has this crucial question. Si uda vuvacha vidanti martya prayena vishyam padam apadam tatapi bunjate Krishna tatkatam svakarachavat Samarita translation.
Sri Uddhava said, "My dear Krishna, generally human beings know that material life brings great future unhappiness, and still they try to enjoy material life. My dear Lord, how can one in knowledge act just like a dog, an ass, or a goat?"
So now from Krishna's answer we will hear from verse 11. Now from here to verse 11 we will hear about how the modes bind us. And there is a crucial question here. How can an educated human being commit himself to such a condemned way of life, wherein the results is practically the same as that of animals? If by cultivating the mode of goodness, one's life is filled with happiness, enlightening, and future rewards, why should anyone cultivate the mode of passion and ignorance? So this is Uddhav's question that, and we have a purport of Srila Vishwanath Srivakti Thakur. Due to an absence of foresight, dogs, asses, and goats put themselves in great danger. A dog steals food at the risk of being beaten or killed, and he often approaches a bitch for sex, and even though she bares her teeth and snarls, threatening him with severe injury, an ass approaches a female ass for sex simply to be kicked by her hind legs. He carries a heavy burden all day long, simply for a little grass that is available everywhere. A goat is being taken to the slaughterhouse, and yet even in that situation he happily approaches a female goat for sex. Similarly, most human beings, being without the understanding that the acts of sense gratification are the very causes of their suffering, indulge themselves without restriction. Uddhav wants to know why human beings are generally mad after sense gratification, and when they know that it will simply cause them miseries in the future. So why are they doing it? That we are preaching to ourselves here. Text 9 and 10. And someone read the reply of the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "My dear Uddhava, a person bereft of intelligence first falsely identifies himself with the material body and mind, and when such false knowledge arises within one's consciousness, material passion, the cause of great suffering, pervades the mind, which by nature is situated in goodness. Then the mind, contaminated by passion, becomes absorbed in making and changing many plans for material advancement. Thus, by constantly thinking of the modes of material nature, a foolish person is affected with unbearable material desires.
So that's the point. That is the whole psychology explained. We are in this body, we identify with the body and the mind, and then the mind focuses on the sense object and become attracted and wants to enjoy, and then the whole thing is put, then the mode of passion is contacted by that, and then one becomes contaminated, more lust comes in, and one becomes absorbed in thinking, I must have that, this is my plan, and then he ends up being completely absorbed in these modes, in this object of the senses, and material desires increases. So, Srila Vishwanatha Thakur, the Supreme Lord says, those who thirst for sense gratification cannot be called learned men, although they think themselves as very intelligent. Although such foolish persons criticize the miseries of material life in innumerable books, songs, newspapers, television programs, civic committees, etc. They cannot desist from material life for a single moment. The process by which one is helplessly bound in illusion is clearly described here. It's a purport. The word sankalpa, vikalpaka, in this verse indicate that materialistic people are constantly making plans in the hopes of attaining happiness and avoiding suffering. Any sane man must admit that in spite of such plans, material life is simply full of miseries. The mind is a creation of the material mode of goodness, and thus it not meant for absorption in attempts to fulfill the animalistic propensity, which are impelled by the lower modes of passion and ignorance. Now, first, so this the process by which one is helplessly bound in illusion is clearly explained here. That so text 11. Karoti kama vasaga karmanach avichitandriya dukodakani sampasyan rajo vega vimohita. Translation, please.
One who does not control the material senses comes under the control of material desires and is thus bewildered by the strong waves of the modes of passion. Thus a person executes material activities, although clearly saying that the result will be future unhappiness.
Yes, that people in ignorance don't see that one in goodness sees what's happening. That and as devotees many times, you're still in passion, but also in goodness. And then when we do something in passion, we know it will cause suffering, and then we feel guilty and so on. But that's part of the process. That's healthy development. So in the hopes of increasing his material enjoyment, a person of uncontrolled senses performed many activities, although he knows very well that they will ultimately bring him misery. Being driven by material desires, materialistic people who are controlled by their senses invite unlimited distress. Text 12. Rajasto tamobhyam yatapi vitvam vikshiptadi punah atandrito manoyunyan dosa dristir nasachyate. Someone can read.
Although the intelligence of a learned person may be bewildered by the modes of passion and ignorance, he should again carefully bring the mind under control. By clearly seeing the contamination of modes of nature, he does not become attached.
So, yes, from this verse onwards, we will hear how an intelligent person hears how the modes are influencing him and then becomes detached. Mashinya Prabhu shares your
Yes,
realization.
Maharaj, I am the person who has the very good experience of this practically. You know, I tell earlier I was trading in the share market and the stock market and making lakhs of rupees one day. And from the morning, when I will go to the washroom, thoughts will come in my brain so much, so much. And by the time I take bath, I will be completely like a crazy person. And then I try to chant and I am unable to chant. I am just speaking the name of the Lord, and then the thoughts are constantly growing in my mind. Then I became frustrated, and then I completely stopped. I completely gave it up. And the morning when I enter in the washroom, I first put the lecture on. The moment I enter in the washroom, I put the lecture on, so that in my mind there should not be any other thought, because these thoughts, once they enter, they keep on multiplying. They keep on multiplying, aggravate, and then the mind becomes worse than dog. The consciousness is highly conditioned. Thank you, Maharaj. This is my practical experience,
Thank
which
you,
I share.
Mashinya Prabhu. I understand you are self-realized in the matter. Very good. Thank you for sharing that text. Yeah, we go to text 13. Apamato nuyunyita manumayach payanchanai anirvino yatakalam chitasva suchitasana. Translation, please.
A person
A
should be
person,
attentive. A person should be attentive and grave, and never lazy and morose. Mastering the yoga procedures of breathing and sitting properly. One should practice fixing the mind on me at dawn, noon, and sunset, and thus gradually the mind should be completely absorbed in me.
So you practice yoga instead of being disturbed by the modes of passion, fixing the mind on me. At dawn, noon, and sunset, those are times we chant Gayatri, and the mind will surely become absorbed in me. So the previous verse, and we heard commentary of Mahasingha Prabhu, that's how how we got this knowledge, this realization. So this previous verse showed how one gets, how this is the process of knowledge, observing that. So in this verse, is what we should do. And then verse 14 is a summary of the yoga system. Etavan yoga adisto machishyai sanakadibihi sarvato mana akrishya mai adavesyate yata. Translation, please.
The actual yoga system as taught by my devotees, headed by Sanak Kumar, is simply this. Having withdrawn the mind from all other objects, one should directly and appropriately absorb it in me.
Yeah, so the four Kumaras, they are explaining, each is expert in one process of liberation, and one is in cultivation of knowledge, the other jnana, vairagya, and yoga, that's in Sankhya. So, yes, one should be attentive and grave that So yoga is about withdrawing the mind from all other objects and becoming completely absorbed in Krishna. That's the definition of yoga in short. Text 15, text 15. Shiuda Vacha Yatatvam Sanakadibhyo Yena Rupena Keshava Yoga Matistavan Eta Rupamechana Veditam. Shiudav, yeah, can someone read, please?
Sri Uddhav said, My dear Keshava, at what time and in what form did you instruct the science of yoga to Sanak and his brothers? I now desire to know about these things.
Yes. Good. Krishna spoke about it and said, Uddhav wants to know more. Shri Bhagavan Vacha Putrayan Yagarbhasya Manasa Sanakadaya Papachu Pitaram Shukshmam Yogasya Kantikam Gatim. So please, the translation.
The Supreme Person Godhead said, once the mental sons of Lord Brahma, namely the sages headed by Sanaka, inquired from their father about the difficult subject matter of the supreme goal of yoga.
Yeah. Sanakanaya Ucho Gunasa Vishate Sheto Guna Sheta Shisa Prabhu Katam Manyonya Santiago Amuksho Rati Risho. Translation.
The sages headed by Sanaka said, O Lord, people's minds are naturally attracted to material sense objects. And similarly, the sense objects in the form of desire enter within the mind. Therefore, how can a person who desires liberation, who desires to cross over activities of sense gratification, destroy this mental relationship between the sense objects and the mind? Please explain this to us.
So that's the essence of the question to the Supreme Lord by the Kumaras. It says, yes, these minds, they are not really attracted to everything in this world. You want to see, to hear, and it comes into the mind. It enters the mind. But one who wants liberation, he wants to stop that. How can I stop that these sense objects are going to enter the mind? How can we destroy these relationships between the sense objects and the mind? So that's the question, and that's interesting. We will, and much of the rest of the chapter is about that point, and the Supreme Lord will give an amazing answer at the end. But before he will chastise a bit for the Kumar, the Sanaka. We will see. That was verse 17. And 17 is the purport of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. So the sons of Brahma said to their father. So yes. So they're asking this question to their father. That human beings are not really attached to sense gratification, and this attachment is firmly rooted in between their minds. How is it possible for a person who wishes to conquer the urges for material enjoyment to cut off the relationship between the sense objects and the mind? An intelligent person must understand that as long as he remains conditioned by the material modes, the modes of nature will constantly disturb him with enticement for sense gratification. If one falls victim to such allurements, the perfection of life will remain unachieved. Serious matter that 17 or 18. So, Shri Bhagavan Vachevam Pishto Mahadeva Swayambhu Bhutta Bhavanam Jayamana Prashna Bijam Napyapatyate Karmadi. Can someone read, please?
The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "My dear Uddhava, Brahma himself, who is born directly from the body of the Lord, and who is the creator of all living entities within the material world, being the best of the demigods, seriously contemplated the question of his sons headed by Sanaka. The intelligence of Brahma, however, was affected by his own activities of creation, and thus he could not discover the essential answer to this question."
Yeah, we see Brahma could not answer the question. He's the most intelligent living entity in the material world. He could not answer it. That's interesting. So we will need help from Hamsa Avatar to answer that question. So the commentary by Vishwanath, the Supreme Lord said Brahma is the best among the demigods and the creator of the living beings. And yet even after much consideration he could not understand the actual answer of the question placed before him by his sons. This was due to the fact that this intelligence had been affected by his activities of creation, which were performed with material attachment. So because of being attached to his activities of creation, Prajapati Brahma, the creator of living entities, was unable to answer the question of his sons. But he was too much absorbed in the mind and his creation and making plans. He could not answer it. But we will get the answer. That's coming by Hamsa Avatar. So now text 19. Samama Sintaya Deva Prashna Paratitirshaya Dasyam Hamsa Rupena Shakasham Ramam Tada. Translation, please.
Lord Brahma desired to attain the answer to the question that was puzzling him, and thus he fixed his mind on me, the Supreme Lord. At that time, in my form of Hamsa, I became visible to Lord Brahma.
Yeah. So the Supreme Lord said, while thinking over the answer to his son's question, Brahma absorbed his mind in meditation upon me. Just to show him mercy, I revealed myself to Brahma by appearing before him in my form as Hamsa. As the Hamsa or swan is able to separate milk from water, I appear to separate Brahma's intelligence from the modes of material nature. Very nice. Being unable to answer the question of Sanak, Brahma began to meditate on the Supreme Lord. At that time being, the Lord assumed the form of Hamsa and appeared before Brahma. Brahma then inquired from Hamsa about his identity. That's interesting. Brahma will ask about his identity. So Brahma was unable to answer the question, and Hamsa Avatar appeared. Tristva Manta Upavacha Kitva Pada Vivandanam Pamanam Mahata Kitva Prapatshuko Bhavaniti. Thus seeing me, can someone read, please?
Thus seeing me, the sages, placing Brahma in the lead, came forward and worshipped my lotus feet. Then they frankly asked me, "Who are you?"
Can you read the purport also?
Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur comments, when Brahma was unable to answer the question placed by the sages, He fixed his mind in the thoughts of the Supreme Lord. The Lord then assumed the form of Hamsa and appeared before Lord Brahma and the sages, who proceeded to inquire about the specific identity of the Lord.
So he says, who are you? But that question to the Lord, who are you? That will lead to the Lord, that he will detect in that question a certain motivation, and so he will chastise. We will see. 21. Ityaham munibi pristas tatvashikna subistata yattavokamaham tebyas tat udavani bhutame. Translation, please read.
My dear Uddhava, the sage spring, eager to understand the ultimate truth of the yoga system, thus inquired from me. Now please hear as I explain that which I spoke into the sages.
So Krishna is speaking to Uddhav, and then it goes to a conversation between the Kumaras and Brahma, who asked the question. Brahma cannot reply, and then Hamsa avatars. Of course, Hamsa is Krishna. And he replies to the sages. So now here, please, how, as I explain it to the sages, that was text 21, 22 now. Vastu niryat yana natva atmana prashaitrisha katam kate tavo vipra vaktu vameka asraya. Read the translation, please.
My dear Brahmanas, if when asking me who I am, you believe that I am also a Jiva soul, and that there is no ultimate difference between us, since all souls are ultimately one without individuality, then how is your question possible or appropriate? Ultimately, what is the real situation or resting place both of yourselves and of me?
So we see here that Hamsa avatar saw a flaw in their question. So the asraya, or the real resting place, is our actual resting place or shelter. But what is our ultimate nature or constitutional position? By inquiring about the shelter or resting place, the Lord is indicating the eternal constitutional position of the living entity. If the living entity and Krishna would be equal, then there would be no deep purpose in one living entity inquiring and another answering. Only one who is in a superior position can meaningfully answer important questions. So Lord Krishna's actual purpose is to explain the ultimate perfection of yoga, which the sages were desiring to know. If one becomes fixed in transcendental knowledge, the mutual attraction between the material mind and the material sense objects automatically ceases. I repeat this again. If one becomes fixed in transcendental knowledge, the mutual attraction between the material mind and the material senses automatically ceases. That is very important knowledge that we should repeat that every day. That's the only solution to get out of it. Of course, Lord Krishna explained that also in Bhagavad Gita 4:35. Yadaidam samidogni. Can someone remove that? Okay, good. Yadaidam si samiduhnir bhashmasa kutarjuna shanachnir sarvakarmani bhashmasa kuti tata. As a blazing fire turns firewood to ashes, O Arjuna, so does the fire of knowledge burns to ashes all reactions to material activities. So there we have also the comparison of blazing fire of knowledge. So if one is fixed in this transcendental knowledge and acts according to it, the mutual attraction between the material mind and the sense objects automatically ceases. So the spiritual mind is not attracted to material sense gratification. Thus by spiritualizing of the mind, material existence automatically slackens. And that's so we will hear the commentaries of 22, because we will go today till 25, then we are halfway, and then because Monday there is no lesson because I'm traveling, and Tuesday we will finish the second part until 26. Yeah, 25 today included. Good. Commentary. The Hamsa incarnation said, "My dear Brahmins, you ask me, who are you? Because you consider me to be a living entity like yourself. Do you think that I possess a material body, or do you think that I am the Supreme Lord? If you consider me to be a living entity, then as a pure spirit soul, on what basis can I distinguish myself from you? How could you ask me such a question?" It was the wrong question to ask. That if there is no difference between the Supreme Lord and the living entities, then there is also oneness of the person who is questioning and the person who is answering. Who should ask a question and to whom? The actual purport of Lord Hamsa's statement is that the spirit soul and the super soul are separate living entities. So that's the next text, 23, is a bit in Paroksavad. Paroksavad is indirect speech, 23. Panchama keshabhuteshu samaneshu savastuta ko bhavaniti va prashna vacharamboyi anahtaka. Please read.
If by asking me, who are you are referring to material body, then I must point out that all material bodies are constituted of 5 elements, namely earth, water, fire, air, and ether. Thus, you should have asked, who are you 5? If you consider that all material bodies are ultimately one, being constituted essentially of the same elements, then your question is still meaningless, since there would be no deep purpose in distinguishing one body from another. Thus, it appears that in asking me my identity, you are merely speaking words without any real meaning or purpose.
So, it spoke about indirect speech because he's answering by asking questions here. So, Vishwanath Thakur, in the previous verse, the Lord indicated that if the sages accepted the impersonal philosophy that all living beings are ultimately one, then the question, who are you, made no sense. So the four Kumaras were specialists in process of liberation. In this verse, the Lord rejects the false conception that the self is a material body which is composed of 5 gross material elements. The sages might argue that even among learned persons it is a matter of courtesy to ask questions and give answers. After all, the Lord had addressed them as Brahmins, and thus had also acted according to social conventions. To answer this argument, the Lord says, "My addressing you as Brahmins would have no meaning if we are ultimately one. I merely reciprocated with your way of speaking. If we are ultimately one, then neither of our statements has any meanings. So he must have perceived this attachment to this philosophy of oneness in the heart of these Kumaras. So the absolute truth is one. But the living entity's material body, which is made of the 5 gross elements, is different from the material bodies. The sages had already seen their father worship the lotus feet of the Lord, so there was no need to their question that. So then we have text 24. Manasa vachasa dristya kriyate nyer apindriyai ahameva namatonya iti buddhyat famanyasa. Translation, please.
Within this word, whatever is perceived by the mind, speech, eyes, or other senses is me alone, and nothing besides me. All of you please understand this by a straightforward analysis of the facts.
Yes. So Hamsa Avatar says here, you have a problem with the sense objects, but whatever is perceived is in me, he says. So in this verse, the Lord refutes the conception that there is the Supreme God far beyond and different from everything within this material world. The Lord explains that since everything is the expansion of His potency, He is not different from anything. So nothing can exist separately from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So the sense objects are also His energy. And thus everything shares in the Lord's nature. Although some manifestations are superior and other inferior. So the Lord is testing the sages here by pointing out various contradictions in their questions. And now we are going back to the original question and what he will say in text 25 is, well, you are seeing only the coverings. You are not seeing the reality. Text 25. Gunasa vishate sheto gunasheta sisat prajaha Shivasya dea upayam gunasheta madatmana. Can someone read the translation, please?
My dear sons, the mind has a natural proclivity to enter into the material sense objects, and similarly, the sense objects enter into the mind. But both this material mind and the sense objects are merely designations that cover the spirit soul, who is part and parcel of me.
Thank you. So the Lord is preparing here to teach the sages perfect spiritual knowledge. This is doing that after rejecting 2 false concepts of life. Two false concepts of life. The first false concept is that all living entities are the same in all respect. That second false concept is that the living entity is identical with his outward and subtle body. These are false concepts. 2 false concepts. So then the Lord answers the question of the sages. He says, my dear son, it's a fact that the mind enters into the material sense objects into the mind. Thus, although the living entity is actually part or parcel of me, being as I'm also eternally conscious, and although the eternal form of the living entity is spiritual, in conditioned life, the living entity artificially imposes upon himself the mind and the sense objects. How can you possibly endeavor to prevent such material attraction? That's the question. Since both the material mind and object are useless, and that's the solution, they both should be completely given up, and thus automatically you will be free from the material duality. So I repeat that again, because that's the solution, but there's a lot to say about that further. Since both the material mind and object are useless, they both should be completely given up, and thus automatically you will be free from all material duality. So, what is the point here? First is the mind makes the error to see the objects as being for our sense enjoyment. That's the first error. The second error that we make is we are not the mind. And the third error we make is that, we are not, we should bring the mind under control of the intelligence and not vice versa. By intelligence we can see the soul, and then we can see Das Ram, we are servants. So we have, I read the purport of this verse 25, the last verse for today. The sons of Brahma taught, my dear Lord, if we are unintelligent, you definitely stated that everything is a manifestation of you alone, because everything is the expansion of your potency. It thus appears that there is an intimate relationship between the mind and the sense objects of the mind. We simply want to ascertain how the mind can be detached from the objects of the senses. Please be merciful and enlighten us. So that was the intention of the question of the sages here, sons of Brahma. And the Lord replied, my dear sons, what you say is very true. Although the living entities are my part and parcels, in conditioned life they artificially identify with the mind and thus become attracted to enjoy the object of the senses. As long as the soul identifies with the mind, desires for sense gratification will continue to harass him. But because the mind and sense objects actually have no connection with the soul, they should be rejected. In this way, one can free from the dualities of material existence. So that by that we can understand when Srila Prabhupada said, when you chant, forget the mind, that it's directly going to the soul, not the mind. Anyway, that don't listen to your mind. It's not easy. Purport. The conditioned living entities in the material world are under the control of the three modes of nature, whereas the Supreme Personality of Godhead, being eternally liberated, is transcendental to the three modes of material nature. Material sense objects enter into the minds of the conditioned living entities, and their minds run after the material sense objects. So then it brings up the point. There is a commentary of Sridhar Swami. One who revives his original spiritual mentality becomes automatically detached from material attraction. Therefore, one should cultivate knowledge of the falsity of sense gratification. Second, one should apply the mind or senses. One should apply when the mind or senses are attracted to material enjoyment. A superior intelligence must immediately detect such illusion. Its superior intelligence means with transcendental knowledge. In this way, one should purify one's mentality. So by devotional service to the Lord, such detachment and intelligence automatically awaken, and by full understanding of one's original spiritual form, one is properly situated in eternal consciousness. Okay. Then we are done for today. On Tuesday we start with text 26. If everything goes good, I will be in Singachalam in Germany. Lalita Pritimaya, please.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Maharaj, can you repeat the first one? Cultivate knowledge. Which one the just you said?
Yeah. So the first one is cultivate knowledge of the falsity of sense gratification. Sense gratification. That so many promises, I'm going to become happy when I gratify my senses. That's the illusory energy. So it's 4:23 now. Let's resume at 4:35. That we have a break of 12 minutes.
Recording stopped.
Hare Krishna.
Recording in progress.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
So, any comments or questions, please? Yes, Pavitra Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you for the wonderful lecture. Maharaj, Lord Krishna's parents are Vasudeva and Devaki. Nisingadev appear from the pillar. So, do Hamsa Avatar have any parents?
That's not mentioned here. That he appeared before Brahma as a swan. That out of as reciprocation with Brahma. But how he appears, I don't know. That of course was a swan. Probably he was flying. But the Lord can appear from everywhere. That is no material source. We can show him instantly to us if he wants. Because he's all pervading, but he can appear everywhere as Bhagavan every moment. He has that potency. Thank you for it, Mother Sitarani, please.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Maharaj, my question is related to text 18.
18.
And,
yeah.
Yes, Maharaj. And we hear in the purport from Jiva Goswami about how Brahma was blessed by Krishna and how, Krishna blessed him that he would never become proud. And yet we see that Brahma could not answer. And in the second paragraph of the purport, it is mentioned that that Brahma unfortunately did become bewildered by his creative functions. So if somebody of that caliber, of that, status is, and who is depending on the Lord and who's been blessed by the Lord becomes proud, what is really the hope for us? So, what can we do to, not fall in the trap, or actually, to rephrase my question, we are already in that trap, but how do we really get out of it?
Yeah, but I must say, it's true. Before we had Lord Brahma praying for 3 things from the Supreme Lord. that from protection, empowerment, and and free from illusion and pride, that and deviation. Brahma prayed for these things. That is true, but what was the answer of the Lord at that time? The answer of the Lord was, yes, it's all granted, provided that as long as you are engaging in full devotional service, then you will not be in illusion. But Brahma is in a very special position. He has to deal with these modes of nature. And he has to become absorbed in it to create. And that never goes without accidents. And because of his contact with the modes of nature, he could not understand the answer of this question. And yes, it means if you are influenced by the modes of nature, even very slightly, that means there are material motivations and pride. So that means, yes. But Brahma is still a pure devotee, because his intentions are purely to please the Supreme Lord. And this little flowers, Sadhareva Samantafya, is still a sadhu. Despite everything, he is a pure devotee. That's what I could say, Mother Sitarani. But you are right that, yes, what's the hope for us? The hope for us is if we are engaging in full devotional service, and then we will be protected. Does that help?
Thank you so much, Maharaj. Thank you. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Mother Kasturica, please.
Maharaj, what is the difference between the three modes of material nature and Maya? They both are the same or different?
Yeah, the question is Maya and the three modes of material nature the same? Maya means illusion. Illusion comes about when we are coming under the influence of the material nature. So these three modes are the instruments of Maya to bring us under illusion. Because these three modes makes us identify with the body and the mind, and material motivations comes, and Maya is, I think I can become happy in this world permanently. That's the Maya. That soon we are getting out. So that is Maya, the illusory energy. But if our mind is connected with Krishna in devotional service, then there is no Maya. And that's a point that will be made in what we learn here, that we identify with the mind and with this body, and therefore we are connected with these sense objects. But we have to give up our attachment by identifying as a spirit soul, as a part and parcel of the spiritual world, and not a part and parcel of the material world. And so it's a misidentification. That's the whole point. Does that help, Kastu?
Yes, Maharaj.
Thank you. Thank you. Mother Lalita Priti Maya, please.
Maharaj, my question is regarding text 4.
Text 4, yeah.
So it's saying that in translation, according to the quality of religious scriptures, water one's association with one children or with people in general. So what does this like? We can think of people in general means there are materialistic people in the modes, in different modes. But what does this mean, like association with one's children? So what point are they trying to make, Maharaj?
Momentum. That's a good point you are making. So this I just get it on the screen again. Read it again. Text 4 was that. 4. Moment. Nearly there. 15. So according to the quality of religious scriptures, water, one's association with one's children or with people in general, the particular place, their time, activities, and the modes of nature become differently prominent. In association with children, you think it's my child. From the moment you think it's my child, then that's false ego. That an association with children, that's mostly there, because children, when we are born, we are all born in ignorance, and children are in ignorance. Later, when they grow up, they come to the mode of passion when they are 12, 13 years old. And then, hopefully, they take the spiritual life, understand goodness, and go further. But children are in ignorance. And if we have to deal with them on their level. And that's unfortunate association. But even that association we can transcend by seeing the children as Krishna's children and educate them in Krishna consciousness. And then you have the highest quality of association with children, seeing them as Krishna's children. So it depends also on our consciousness. And this verse is warning us: protect yourself, see your children in the right way, educate them to come to goodness, and so on, and then you will be protected. Does that help, Mother?
Jai, thank you so much, Maharaj. That was a very, very thoughtful answer what you gave. Thank you so much, Maharaj.
I'm trying my best and answers, but anyway. Chaitanya Prema Prabhu, please.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you very much. Dandavad pronounced. All glory to you. My question is in relation to Mother Sitarani's question. It's on the verse 18.
Yeah.
The last paragraph of the purpose. That in the present verse, in this 13th chapter of the 11th canto, Lord Krishna states that Lord Brahma, unfortunately, did become bewildered by his creative functions, thus providing a grave lesson to all the Lord's empowered representatives. What is this lesson? Although one may be elevated to an exalted position in the Lord's transcendental service, at any moment there is danger of false pride polluting one's devotional mentality. So false pride is very dangerous, and it can easily creep in through our intelligence in the form of superiority complex. And what it does is that it pollutes our devotional mentality. Instead of seeing ourselves as humble servants, or people being given the opportunity to serve as nevers, we begin to feel we are superior, we are more qualified. That's why we are in the position to serve. So how can one practically guide against or protect our devotional mentality from being polluted by false pride? Even as we are studying this scripture now, one can say, oh, now I'm a Bhaktivedanta. I know so much more than I've studied more than you. Therefore, I know more than you. Whenever we find ourselves in argument, we can say, oh, I'm a Bhaktivedanta. Have you done Bhakti Vaibhav? How much have you really studied? And you're arguing with me. So how can we protect our pure devotional mentality from being polluted by false pride and superiority complex? This is my question.
You are only polluted by this false pride when you come to the platform of self-realization. Someone asked Bhujam Prabhu, are you self-realized? And Bhujam Prabhu replied, yes, I am self-realized. I realized I'm a complete nonsense. You understand? And that should be your realization at the end of this Bhaktivedanta course also. That we are complete nonsense. Why are we in this material world? That's not good. Then you realize that unless we come to that realization, pride will come up. We think ourselves the doers and so on. But Krishna will smash it again and again and again. So if you think that after this course you are a Bhaktivedanta, Krishna will smash you. No problem. These are a few points I could make, Chaitanya Prema. Does that help? Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.
Then, Mother Prabhupada, please.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I just have a small technical question because we were talking about the mind today, and I was remembering that yesterday's class we were looking at the 4 stages of speech and how it starts in the prana, the subtle air at the base of the spine, and then it goes through the mind, and it's mentioned there that the mind is in the navel. But my understanding was that the mind is in the heart region. So I don't know, do you have any further explanation on that in relation to these?
The subtle body is movable, and yogis can move these things. But usually the soul is in the heart, and the mind is connected with the brain. It's connected with the brain, subtle to the synapse, little electronic impulses, which connects us with the subtle body. And that's proven by scientists. But great yogis, they can move the subtle body. They can move the soul to the chakras upwards, and also the mind. And they can, that's... We will speak about the yogic perfections in the last chapter. There will be not much to comment on it, but these yogis, they can do these things. That's what I was thinking about when you brought up the point. I don't know, is that helpful?
And also, like, what form does the mind take within the body? Is it just kind of like it's in a confined space, or does it pervade everything, or?
The soul, like Srila Prabhupada explains, you see this arm below the gross arm, there is a subtle arm. That's a subtle body. That it's all pervading within the body. And you have the gross senses, the subtle senses, and the spiritual senses. Without the spiritual senses, the subtle senses cannot be there, cannot be the gross senses. So our original form, spiritual form is there, but is covered over. And then you have Yam Yam, Vapi, Swampram, Teante, Kalevram, Tam Tam Avetis, Kantia, Satsat Bhava Bhavita. What the mind is absorbed in at the time of death creates a certain body. And that is already the form of your next body. It goes to the womb of the appropriate mother, and therefore the subtle body is constructed. The gross body is constructed on the form of the subtle body. On the form of the subtle body. Like you make a skyscraper, first they make a metal construction, and then they fill it up. So that I remember from the teachings of Srila Prabhupada. He mentioned that in his classes, that so many classes to hear. I'm hearing every day Prabhupada's classes. That I heard all the Bhagavad Gita lectures again, and now I'm hearing the Bhagavatam lectures again. He reveals all these things that's what I heard from him.
That's interesting. So that explains also like why ghosts can also appear in forms, because the subtle body has a form according to the consciousness.
Yeah.
It's not that, I was thinking that, is it that the subtle body kind of just takes the shape of the gross body the way water takes the shape of its container, but it's the other way around. The gross body takes the shape of the subtle body.
Yeah, you've seen the Mahabharata, these Rakshasas, and they can change their form, right? So but they have subtle bodies. They can change their forms. They have mystic power to do that, and create even a gross body on that.
Thank you, Maharaj. Very
anyway, I only don't have experience with it. Not that I remember. Maybe I was a Rakshasa in one life. We forget. Good. Thank you, Mother Prabhupada. Good. So then we will have our next lesson on Tuesday. Because
Jyoti Krishna has his hand up there.
Okay.
Not the digital one, just the real one.
Okay. That's.
Maharaj, I wanted to say two things. One is, we just gave a class in Ramayana, so, Marichi, he just becomes a deer, so, to distract Lord Ram from Sita. So that's an example of a Rakshasa,
Sure.
taking another form, like you just said, gross form of a deer. But anyway, my point was earlier that, these four Kumaras, they were impersonal until they actually smelt the aroma of the tulsi leaves. This is at the start of Bhagavatam. So here, are they still impersonalists, or the Kumaras, sons of Brahma, are they still impersonalists, or they are?
Well, of course, they are embodiments of processes of self-realization that through Jnana, Vairagya, and Sankhya Yoga. Each has its speciality, and yes, but it means they are teaching that they are very much absorbed in it. And whether it was before or after they met Lord Narayan, I can't say. But if it was after, they know these things, but still it seems they are very absorbed in their impersonal philosophy for liberation. And that shows it's dangerous to absorb in that too much. It may be helpful, but yeah. Does that help, Swam Jyoti Krishna? Hare Krishna. So now I've a program here. I have to give a lecture in 20 minutes, and tomorrow I have another lecture in Brussels, and I'm traveling to Germany with a night bus, 24 hours traveling. I arrive Monday at Singachalem in Germany, and then from there Tuesday I will have the class in Singachalem on Tuesday, and then I'm traveling to Prague, and the rest of the classes, the last 3 classes will be from Prague in Czech Republic. So thank you very much. Hare Krishna, Jai Prabhupada.
Sit Jai
Thank you,
Maharaj.
Maharaj.
Jai, Jai,
Thank you,
Jai,
Maharaj.
thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Baba.